All right, let's dive into something that's going to mess with your head a little bit. It's a huge philosophical puzzle that's hiding in plain sight in the words we use every single day. And it all kicks off with one simple question.
So when does a little change actually become a real change? I mean, think about it. It sounds so straightforward, doesn't it? But trust me, this one little question has the power to completely unravel what we think we know about logic. And it all begins with, of all things, a pile of sand.
Okay, let's start with something we can all agree on. Premise number one. One single grain of sand is not a heap, right? I mean, that's just obvious. Nobody's going to argue with that. It's a solid place to start. Okay, now for premise number two. And this is where it gets interesting. If you have something that is not a heap, like our lonely grain of sand, and you add just one more grain, does that one tiny addition suddenly magically turn it into a heap? No way, right? It just seems impossible. The change is way too small. Where's the magic moment? It feels like it doesn't exist.
So here's the kicker. If we take those two perfectly reasonable ideas, one grain isn't a heap, and adding one more grain can't make it a heap, and we just follow that logic, well, what happens? One grain isn't a heap, so 2 grains can't be a heap, which means 3 grains can't be a heap. You see where this is going, right? If you follow this step by step, you end up with something completely nuts. 1,000,000 grains of sand is still not a heap, but that's just wrong. We look at 1,000,000 grains of sand and we all say, yep, that's a heap. So what just broke?
What just broke is that we've walked right into a massive collision. It's a fundamental clash between the messy, intuitive way we talk every day and the super strict black and white rules of logic. And this has a name. It's called the Sorites Paradox. It comes from the ancient Greek word soros, which literally means heap. And that's what this puzzle's all about, vagueness. It's about how our normal, everyday words with these blurry, fuzzy edges, can totally fall apart and lead to crazy contradictions when you try to pin them down with logic.
Here's a great way to think about it. Our everyday language, it's like a paintbrush. It's flexible, it's a bit blurry, it's awesome for painting a general picture. But formal logic, that's a ruler. It's all about precision, sharp lines, exact measurements. The paradox happens when we try to measure that soft, fuzzy brushstroke with a super precise ruler. They just don't work together. And look, this is not some weird abstract thing that only applies to sand. This problem is everywhere. Think about it. When does a person become bald? It's not after losing one single hair, right? When does someone who's rich become poor? It's not from losing $1. When is a tall person no longer tall? 1 millimeter shorter? You can apply this same broken logic to all of these things and you get the same bizarre results every single time.
I love this next analogy. Reality, most of the time, works like a dimmer switch, you know? Change happens gradually, smoothly. Baldness sort of fades in. But our language? It desperately wants to be a light switch. On or off. Bald or not bald. We try to force this simple binary choice onto a reality that's just not like that at all.
Okay, so at this point, you might be thinking, all right, this is a fun little brain teaser, a bit of wordplay, but the thing is, the consequences of this vagueness are actually huge. They're not just philosophical games. They have incredibly serious impacts on the most important parts of our world. Let's talk about the law. We say you become an adult at exactly 18. Why? Is a person really that different at midnight on their 18th birthday than they were 1 minute before? Of course not. Human development is a dimmer switch, but the law, out of necessity, has to install a light switch. It has to draw a sharp and, frankly, completely arbitrary line.
Or what about medicine? This one hits close to home. Your lab results, your blood pressure, your cholesterol, those are numbers on a spectrum, a continuum. But the diagnosis you get is healthy or you have hypertension. It's a category. It's a light switch. So where exactly is that line drawn? And who gets to decide what number tips you from one category into the next? And then there's ethics. This is something we all deal with. A little bit of pressure at work, maybe that's just motivation. But you add a little more, and a little more, and a little more. At what precise moment does that cross the incredibly blurry line and become coercion or bullying? There's no clear answer.
So, okay, if this paradox is so important and it's everywhere, surely someone has solved it, right? Well, people have definitely tried. For centuries, in fact. Let's take a quick look at the main attempts to wrestle this problem to the ground.
All right, so there are basically 4 big ways thinkers have tried to tackle this. First, you've got the sharp cutoff idea. This says there is a precise line. There's one exact grain of sand that makes it a heap, but it's hidden from us. It's like a cliff edge that's totally lost in the fog. We just can't see it. Then there's fuzzy logic. This one leans into the dimmer switch idea. It says things can be partly true. So you could be, say, 70% bald or have something that's half a heap. The third approach is contextualism. This is pretty intuitive. It just says the rules change depending on the context. 5 grains of sand is definitely a heap if you're a scientist looking under a microscope, but it's absolutely nothing on a beach. And finally, some people just bite the bullet and reject that second premise we started with. They say, you know what, at some point, one tiny change does make all the difference. It's like the single drop of water that makes an already full glass finally overflow.
So we've got all these different clever attempts to solve the puzzle. But at the end of the day, what's the real lesson here? What's the big takeaway from all of this? Here it is. The most important thing to get is that the Sorites Paradox isn't really about sand or money or hair. It's about us. It's a spotlight on this fundamental mismatch between the way the world actually works, which is gradual and smooth and continuous, and the way our brains try to make sense of it, which is by using these neat, sharp binary boxes.
Think about it like this. Nature, reality, it moves in slopes.
But our language, our laws, our neat little categories, we don't draw slopes, we draw stairs. We build these sharp, distinct steps. You're either a child or you're an adult. You're healthy or you're sick, rich or poor.
And that right there, that's the whole thing. The Sorites Paradox lives in the gap. It pops into existence right where our neat, tidy, man-made stairs try to describe the messy, continuous slope of reality. It's a problem we literally create for ourselves.
So I want to leave you with a question to chew on. We've seen how this works in big areas like law and medicine. But where is it showing up in your world? Where in your life are you treating a gradual slope like a set of stairs? How many of these invisible, arbitrary lines, these cliffs in the fog, are quietly shaping your decisions, your judgments, and how you see everything around you?